Bizarre loves and wedding intrigues. An unexpected journey into the Middle Ages. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you are new and leave a like. Now let's start. Today we live in a liberal world where practically everything is allowed, or almost everything. However, in the Middle Ages, everything was completely different, especially when it came to relationships between men and women. Early on, the medieval church established rules and doctrines to establish norms of human behavior. Virginity was practically the most important thing a woman had to maintain before marriage in the Middle Ages. Only many failed to accomplish this feat. For this reason, the Roman Catholic Church made it possible for women to regain their purity, even if it was physically impossible. To do this, the Church ordered these women to confess their sins, do years of penance, and spend the rest of their lives in a convent. Another solution was to pretend to be a virgin, so the day before the wedding the bride would put a leech under her skin so that the blood would flow and form a small scab. At the expected moment when she was with her husband, she bled and deceived him about her purity. It seems that this second option was more accepted than spending her whole life in a convent. Making love in a fanciful way was not well regarded in the Middle Ages. The Church established rules for this too. Marriage had only one purpose: procreation. That is why the missionary position became the standard of the time. Other positions were considered bestial, that is, similar to those of animals, and therefore could hinder conception. In the 13th century, German friar Albertus Magnus classified 5 positions as morally questionable, but not sinful to the point of being mortal. However, the missionary remained the most suitable and recommended for married life and procreation. Historically, marriage was seen as a utilitarian practice for procreation, rather than for love. However, the High Middle Ages introduced a new literary concept that portrayed romance like never before: courtly love. Although the term became popular in 19th century France, it was already present in the poetry of the 11th century troubadours, in the French regions of New Aquitaine and Champagne. These works extolled the virtues of romance between a knight and a lady. The whole thing was often secret, aristocratic, and extramarital. The woman was almost always already married, and the illicit nature of the relationship only increased the love. Courtly love emphasized traits such as chivalry and nobility, qualities that we still associate with medieval knights today. The late Middle Ages were notable, among other things, for the witch hunts, which persecuted dozens of people, mostly women. Many suspicious practices could lead to a person being declared a witch or wizard, and this sometimes included midwives. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII issued the bull Summis Desiderantes Affectibus, recognizing the existence of witches. Then, the Inquisitor Heinrich Kramer wrote the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, accusing midwives of deceiving young girls and using unbaptized children for witchcraft rituals. Although references exist in demonological texts, midwives as witches are now seen as a modern myth, debunked by historians such as Margaret Murray. Yes, women used contraceptive methods in the Middle Ages, although very different from those of today. The Church disapproved of these methods since it considered procreation a divine gift and the purpose of marriage. However, demographic studies show that pregnancies decreased after the age of 30, suggesting the use of various methods of contraception. These were passed down orally between midwives. Examples: coitus interruptus, herbal contraceptives, etc. The history of clerical marriage in the Middle Ages is long and complex. It was common for a priest to have a wife and children. The law on celibacy was in force for centuries, but not always strictly applied. Only with the Lateran Councils I and II did the Church officially prohibit the marriage of priests. Many medieval countries considered consummating the marriage part of the wedding ceremony. If one spouse was unwilling to procreate, the other could seek an annulment. There are dozens of cases of medieval proofs of impotence. The most famous, King Philip II of France and Ingeborg, daughter of the Danish king. Philip tried to annul the marriage by claiming temporary impotence, but was found to be lying. On August 18, 1572, Marguerite de Valois married Henry of Navarre, a Protestant. The marriage caused one of the worst massacres in the history of France, the Massacre of Saint Bartholomew, with at least 3,000 Huguenots massacred in Paris a few days after the wedding. Despite this, Henry became King of France 20 years later. King Philip IV of Spain married his own niece, causing enormous genetic problems. Their son, Charles II, had serious physical and mental problems. He was sterile, and after his death, the War of the Spanish Succession broke out. Henry VIII of England had 6 disastrous marriages. He divorced his first wife, had his second beheaded, his third died, his fourth was repudiated, his fifth was beheaded, and only his sixth survived. In 1795, George of Wales married Caroline of Brunswick, but he detested his bride so much that he exclaimed, "Give me some cognac," the moment he saw her. On the day of the wedding, he was so drunk that 2 dukes had to support him at the altar. In 1589, James VI of Scotland was returning from his honeymoon with Anne of Denmark when a storm nearly sank their ship. Convinced that witches wanted to kill him, he began a witch hunt in Scotland. In 1736, Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, aged 16, married Prince Frederick of Wales, who was almost 30. On the wedding day, she was nervous and vomited on her dress, and even on her mother-in-law, Queen Caroline. In 1422, during a wedding banquet, King Canute died suddenly while making a toast. In 1388, Edward II of England married 12-year-old Isabella of France. At the ceremony, she kissed another man, Piers Gaveston, her lover. Years later, Isabella took revenge and overthrew him. Alfred the Great, King of Wessex, suffered from hemorrhoids at the age of 19 and prayed to God to relieve him of the pain. He woke up with a worse intestinal problem, perhaps Crohn's disease, on his wedding day. Lady Diana was nervous before her wedding to Charles, Prince of Wales. She suspected he still loved Camilla. She ruined her wedding dress with perfume and called Charles by his father's name, Philip, during the ceremony. The rite of the first night, or ius primae noctis, is a legend according to which the feudal lord had the right to the first night with the bride of his servants. In reality, it was often a question of misunderstandings or symbolic gestures, such as placing one's hand on the bed. There is no concrete historical evidence that it was a widespread or legal custom. However, it had a great cultural impact and was used to show how barbarous the medieval era was, even in works like Braveheart. The Epic of Gilgamesh and accounts by Herodotus mention similar customs long before the Middle Ages. That's all for today. And what do you think about this medieval topic? Let me know in the comments, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. See you next time. Bye.